Hello everyone, my name is Claire Whelan. I'm on the marketing team here at VisibleThread. You're all very welcome to today's webinar. We're joined on the call today by US-based defense contractor Leonardo DRS. We're going to discuss how they use VT docs to ensure RFP requirements are assigned and categorized correctly for cross-functional teams. But before we get started, I just want to quickly go through some housekeeping. Our call today will be about 45 minutes long. We have a question facility, so if you do have any questions, please ask them there for the Q&A session at the end. We also have a survey at the very end of the webinar, and it'd be great if you could give us your feedback there. We are recording the session, and we'll email you the slides and recording in a couple of days, and it'll also be available on our website. So let's meet our speakers. I'm delighted to welcome Paul Pilkington and Jim Conyers from Leonardo DRS. Paul is Senior Manager of Engineering Excellence and has been with Leonardo DRS for 10 years. Jim is currently the Engineering Manager of the Commercial and Marine Systems Engineering Group. Also on the call today, we have VisibleThread's Customer Success Manager, David Colgan. So let's get started. Over to you, David.
Thanks, Claire. Appreciate the introduction. Hello, everyone. Welcome again to our webinar series. I'm really happy to have one of our really prime customers with us, Leonardo DRS. We've been working closely with them for a number of years. This has been an exciting collaboration between ourselves where we've been able to aid in a key element of their proposal process. Just to give you a little bit of background from the VisibleThread side of what we'll be looking at today. So we'll be on the VT Docs platform, primarily looking at document shredding and matrix creation and how leveraging dictionaries can aid in that. Our agenda for today. So first of all, we'll give you a little bit of background. So it'll be essentially why we started this project, some of the key challenges for cross-functional teams in any sort of manual review context. Particular here is when you're dealing outside of the engineering team, but we'll be going into a little bit more depth in the background on that. Then we'll look at Leonardo DRS's process in particular and how we helped automate certain elements of their requirement traceability matrix creation and some of the fruitful results we had off the back of that. We'll then be diving into how we did that using VT Docs and going through to a direct demo where we'll actually be showing the creation of the requirement traceability matrix, how we augment that, and how Leonardo DRS has really creatively and innovatively used VT Docs elements to get time savings, other benefits, and other great work in our collaboration together. So for further ado, some of those key challenges. So from discussions with our customer base, you know, I'm out there every day speaking with customers large and small, and time and again, we see these key challenges, and particularly working with Paul and Jim, some things they brought to our attention is that manually intensive, first of all, you know, you're dealing with hundreds of page documents and you're relying on various disparate teams to filter and to account for all those non-technical requirements. So things like an inefficient review cycle, risk of missing certain requirements, certain revision control challenges, you know, when amendments come out. It could take several days to parse and assign and distribute these requirements to various teams, resulting in, you know, inefficient use of resources, multiple people reviewing the same documents for similar things, and then a disparity in the review management of that, and then returning those requirements to the proposal manager. All essentially leading to a pretty common concern in proposal land of human error. Not necessarily intentional, but just by virtue of time constraints, this can lead to missed requirements and possible scope change unnecessarily. And really, it's more filtering down into some behavioral challenges. Engineering technical teams are used to scrubbing and parsing docs and handling requirements, but often other adjacent disciplines, you know, supply chain manufacturing, may not be as evolved or used to these requirement processes. Paul, I know this is something you have a long history of experience with. I guess you could speak to these key challenges as well as I could.
Yeah, and so I could add that, you know, prior to VisibleThread, it was, you know, there'd be maybe a proposal kickoff, you know, we received an RFP from a customer, and then there's a file share with a whole bunch of statement of work or, you know, the specs and stuff, and it's just, okay, leave all the disciplines to their own devices to go off and sift through this documentation. And now when you bring in VisibleThread and you're shredding these documents, now, with the macro you developed for us, now we can assign who owns them, right? So to your point, engineers are used to going through the technical specs and dividing up, oh, these are mechanical, electrical, or software requirements, and they go off and digest that. But you've got, manufacturing, supply chain, potentially quality and stuff that may, are not as disciplined or evolved. And so we've been bit in the past where they've what we would classify as non-technical requirements that are on the contract, but not necessarily impacting the product we're designing to deliver to the customer.
And thankfully, also with working directly with Jim, who's in this on a day-to-day basis, he kind of gave us this spec'd up view of your current process, Jim. So if you could give us a little background on this and kind of speak to it.
Yeah, sure. So this is a very simplified view of generally how we'll handle various RFPs, requests for quotes that come in from various customers. Typically, when they come in, we'll do a first pass. Are we bidding? No bidding. There's some certain RFPs that may come in that might just not be in our wheelhouse. But once we decide to go ahead and bid, we'll set up a proposal team, and then depending on the complexity, we've been starting to use VT docs to shred the statement of work, the technical specification, any other documentation that needs to really be sifted through to ensure that we're covering all the requirements, we're covering everything that's being asked of us by our customers. So that's really step one, is to use VT docs, do the shredding. That's something that we've been doing for a while. But then taking it a step further, as we move further into the process, we'll do some work to determine our technical offering, what products or services or mix thereof we'd offer, and then go off and do the real work of the proposal, developing a proposal outline and writing it, developing all of our pricing. But part of this too is that second box there is the proposal requirements traceability matrix, which especially for very complicated, very large proposals that could be very, very time intensive and cost intensive, developing a crisp set of exceptions and clarifications so that when we ultimately write the proposal, and also when we communicate what we are bidding to our management, the macro that's been developed that helps organize all the outputs of that makes it very clear to communicate not only to our internal management, but also to our customer what precisely we are bidding on, what things we're compliance with, or maybe we're compliant, but we need to clarify a few things, or maybe we're taking exception to stuff. And it provides a great framework to be able to clearly break that down, have each function be able to contribute to it, document it, and communicate it internally, externally, so that in the end, when we finalize all of our proposal deliverables and submit the proposal, we have something that we have a higher degree of confidence in, that we've covered all the bases and there's a much lower risk that we've missed anything.
Perfect. And today we're going to be looking at that in a bit of depth, and how VT kind of helped along with the automation of that. There's 5 key steps that we'll be covering. The first 2 of these are, first of all, outside of VT docs. An element we hear time and again is there could be silos of information, and how VT docs can help with that in an adjacent way is ensuring or starting a collaboration between the departments to build our dictionaries. Those of you familiar with VT docs will know what dictionaries are, but I'll give you a little bit of background on that as we step through it. We'll then be leveraging those dictionaries to shred, as we saw in that first step, shred and outline where the requirements are located in the document using our matrix shred and VT docs. We'll then run that macro that we collaborated with DRS to create based on what they were previously doing manually. We'll be looking at our instructions tab there. We'll go into a little bit more detail in a moment with Jim, showing how that could be incredibly useful for exactly right, sharing with the cross-functional teams, ensuring we get the feedback in a standardized, automated way, and then ultimately how we can use that feedback to summarize and report on the compliance, the results, and the handling of those requirements towards the end. Okay, so our first port of call on that is building our dictionaries. And Paul, you could speak to a little bit how the collaboration element was crucially important here. I've created this outline, which essentially surmises each of the departments. And when we were collaborating with each of the departments to compile a list of terms or phrases relevant to them. But Paul, you speak to a little bit about how this is useful within the process.
Correct. So then there was a gentleman on a proposal team that I was working with for VisibleThread, showing him how would you develop a dictionary, and then went off to the team members from the various disciplines, as you see in the spreadsheet, to say, hey, what kind of keywords or what kind of things do you care about that that you'd like us to highlight through these various documents coming in from the customer for an RFP. And so collaboratively working with these various groups, came up with a list of terms. You'll notice some have asterisks next to them, which just says any tense of that term or that it's starting with, so you don't have to put every variation of report, reporting, reported, or something like that. Kind of helps streamline that as well.
And very
so
easily. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead. Nope, I was going to say you'll see a bunch of numbers in there, and so like the 252, 52, happen to be some DFAR clauses that those teams were particularly wanted to focus on, that they put in the data dictionary that they wanted highlighted as as an example.
And really what this is going to act as is a data search or a compilation of terms to indicate relevance to that particular department. And it's actually a very straightforward process to convert this into the format that will then be uploaded into VT Docs. So for example, with program management, that's going to essentially be our category, and the list of terms relevant from the program management team will act as our term search. Okay. How we upload them into VT Docs is using a comma-separated value file. So all we've done really is take our department, apply that as our category, list our terms in column B. They're going to be the ones that we'll find within the document. And we can add a third column of a description. This can be used just to clarify which department it's relevant to. But in the particular case with FAR and DFARs for the contracts admin, they find huge value in the ability to designate what the kind of classification that FAR or DFAR is relevant to them. So if it's part of their mandatory flow down, if it's non-applicable, if it could potentially be business unit compliant, but needs to be flagged, okay? And these can be very flexible, very customizable, depending on your needs or wants. In this case, we're using them to indicate relevance to a various department. All I do, save that as a CSV file on my desktop, where I have it already, and jump to VT Docs. VT Docs, browser-based system with our two main areas, our folders where we do most of our work, and then our dictionaries tab. Very easily and quickly, I can create a brand new dictionary by selecting our plus, click Quality Dictionary. I'm going to call this our DRS RTM for Responsibility Traceability Matrix Dictionary. Click OK. I now have a brand new empty dictionary, and I want to populate it with all that hard work and collaboration we've done from the various departments. All I have to do is import terms from the text file, browse, and find our desktop. Here I have it, our cross-team assignment dictionary, open and import. We'll now have our dictionary or our search terms populated under their categories or their logical groupings, with each of the relevant terms populated below and any sort of description or useful indicators matched alongside them. We now, of course, want to apply this to the documents in question. Every document in VisibleThread needs to be held in a folder. So we'd create a new folder. I have one here for our example today. I've uploaded a large RFP and a functional amendment to that. And what do we want to do? We want to apply that dictionary we've just created. So select my file, jump to quality analysis. This is the main home for any sort of matrix creation within VisibleThread. Give it just a moment. So I have an initial dictionary here, which is our starter compliance matrix scan, which a lot of you will be very familiar with. I now want to change the lens or the view. So I'm going to switch, use our different dictionary. I'm going to find our new DRS RTM dictionary and set. What this will do now is parse through, I believe this RFP is roughly in the region of 200 pages long. It'll scan it against each of those search terms relevant to that category. Give it just a moment. And we'll get numerical indicators of the volume of terms relevant to that business unit. I'm now going to very quickly, in a couple of clicks, create our initial responsibility traceability matrix. Okay, so I can create a compliance matrix, shred this document. Because we're using macros now today, we need to make sure we have this include macros, customize output, checked, and generate. We'll now get our Excel format of our initial matrix developed. What's important to remember is this dictionary is going to act as our indicator. Oh, I'll move that to the side. Just a moment. And here now is our shred. Just a few details about every shred within VisibleThread before we move on to the macro. In column F is the entire content of the RFP laid out in the same sequential order as it appears in the PDF. Okay, and anywhere where we have a hit on that dictionary, the sentence will be marked in yellow and any key terms highlighted in red. You'll have all your referencing for the document in C, D, and E, so what page it belongs to, the paragraph, and any sub-referencing, if there is any indicated in the PDF. You'll be told the categories that are relevant to that sentence, the terms, and any relevant term description. Okay. But what we're interested in today is our macro. So I'm going to run the macro using our macro screen here above. We get our macro menu. So this essentially means any macros that you're currently running yourself in-house, we can formalize them into our macro workbook. And rather than having to go into developer screen, run macros, you know, everyone have a disparate, different lists of available macros, they'll be summarized here in a single list. We can select the macro and run. Click OK. Love an OK. And close. We've now modified this into a template or a format similar to what was required with DRS. So we've had some columns added, but we'll get to those in a moment. And pardon me, I'll just make this the full screen. There we are. But a key point is we've had two tabs added. So I'm going to jump to the instructions tab and allow you, Jim, to explain a little bit about the origin story behind this, where it was originally developed, and some of the nuances and ability to change here.
All right. Yes. So this originated with you know, as discussed previously, oftentimes parsing through a lot of these various technical and non-technical requirements can span multiple documents and involve multiple people across multiple functions. So sometimes herding cats like that can be a challenge. So one simple thing is, okay, let's come up with a standard process or a standard workflow to help us step through how we're going to go through all these. So this instruction screen here really just is a very serial way of going about it. Starting with ensuring that the you basically run the macro, and also that when you've shredded the document, that it was shredded in such a way where everything is parsed out in a way that makes sense. And VisibleThread allows you a couple different ways to shred, and different documents will require you to massage that. So step one is make sure everything comes in properly. Then steps 2 and 3 here, which are listed as optional, but depending on the size and complexity of the requirements and the team, allows you to designate either by function, or maybe your organization is such that you just want to designate by name, and the various people who will be going through the document or documents. And so you can list a function or a name in step 2 there. So, whether it's engineering, manufacturing, engineering, quality, or, Joe, Bob, Jane, whatever, however you want to put it in there. So that, and then when we go back to the shredded document, you'll see where this comes into play. And this is customizable, so you can add, subtract as needed, and modify as needed. This is just what the default is from there. Then step 3 there is if it's appropriate for the document being reviewed, you can put in a verification method. So sometimes you want to say, how am I going to comply with this requirement? Is it analysis? Is it by inspection, test? But that is optional. So you can modify that list as well. So if there's something different for your organization that makes sense, that's completely customizable. And then step 4, and this is really the key here, is having a standard way of categorizing all the requirements. And this was alluded to before, going through and saying, are we going to be compliant to this? Are we going to be compliant, but we need to clarify something to say, yeah, we comply with this, but you said the thing needs to be red and we're going to make it blue, something like that. But we're going to paint it. We're not compliant. We're not complying with this, and here's why. Maybe it's out of scope. Maybe it's something that's not applicable to what you're being asked to bid on or review. Or in many cases, when you shred a document, sometimes it'll pick up headers and other or just informational statements, so you can say not required. So it provides these are the standard definitions that everyone can look at and say, this is the lens through which we're going to look at all of these requirements, and this is how we're going to adjudicate them. So everyone's on the same page and we're all speaking the same language. So compliant to one person means the same to another. And then step 5 is the summary page that we can go to, that basically summarizes all the outputs of the work when you go through and parse through and evaluate all the requirements in the shredded documents.
Let's look a little bit at that functionality, so where we can actually use these adjustments and the changes. That's back here on our document. So I'm actually just going to hide a few columns just to get us into the interesting stuff. Clean up the view a little bit. And the beauty really is, because we're in Excel, it's fully customizable. So you can apply any rules or formatting really how you like. Just apply a few borders and a quick filter. So one important element actually within VT, separate to the macro, is we have this grouping mechanism here on the left, which can actually remove any white space. So we further drill down on just the indicated sections based on our dictionary. So Jim, if you'd like to speak a little bit to L, M, and N, and O, and how it's used within your organization at the moment.
Yeah, so columns L, M, and O, those are what was designated on the instructions tab as step 2, 3, and 4. So this is where you can go through, and based on the list that was put on the instructions page, you can, via a drop-down menu, easily pick functional responsibility. So if it's something where this particular requirement belongs to a certain function or needs to be reviewed by a certain function, you can indicate that. Then you can also indicate the requirement status. Is it, once you read it, say, yep, we are going to comply to that. That makes sense. Or maybe we're going to comply to that, but we need to clarify something. So you can then, in the next column over, write some clarifying comment, something that you would want to ultimately maybe include in your proposal to say, yeah, we're going to meet this, but here's this is vague, and here's our interpretation of what this means, or something like that, or just take exception, and here's why we're taking exception. And then on the right there is the verification method. That's again optional, but if it's appropriate, you can then indicate the method by which you will demonstrate compliance, whether it's inspection, analysis, test, or something else. And so this now you're at a point where you can go through line by line and systematically go through all of the requirements and very clearly indicate who's responsible, what the requirement status is, and verification method if needed. Again, columns L and O are optional. Columns M and N are the more at least in our process mandatory, because that's where you're actually saying whether you comply or not.
Now we might actually look at one we pre-made earlier, just so that we have, a little bit more valuable results. So, and I'll jump to. This is essentially one where we filled out, and what we're going to look at is how using N and O being crucially important to Jim and his team, how using the previously formulaic but now applied in the macro, how the value is driven to the summary tab. So I'll jump to the summary tab.
What the summary tab allows is it takes all of the work done on the various tabs, and as you can see here, this is a document that included 2 shredded documents, both contained in the same document, and they're both summarized here on the summary page. So this is a good dashboard that allows you to look and say, okay, how many requirements, unique requirements did we have? How many have we assessed or not assessed? So it allows you to get a good, you also quantify, did we miss anything going through? Oops, we forgot the last couple, or there was one in the middle, but it allows you at least do a check and say, did we get them all? Also, if you indicated that they are either a clarification with comment or an exception, it'll flag it to say it's missing a comment. So if you said compliant with clarification, but no clarification was provided, this will flag it to say, hey, more work that needs to be done, and so forth. So that's what those are there. So it's a good way of quantifying and just as a quality check as to how rigorous everything went through. Then the next section down there is summary of compliance. So it ultimately says what was ultimately how many requirements were compliant, not compliant, and so forth. And it also breaks it down in percentages and expresses it in a pie chart down below. So it gives a good visual representation of how once the proposal team has gone through the document or documents, where did everyone land? And the thought here was that this would be a good some portion of this dashboard or the pie charts would be something that would be good to be able to communicate both internally to your management team, maybe in a bid review or some kind of management authorization to propose something, to give confidence that yes, we've reviewed all the requirements, we've assessed them, and we've covered all the bases, and we're not missing anything. We're not going to have a big, $1 million miss because we forgot to take exception where we needed to or clarify some point. So it provides confidence internally to the management team that the team has gone through and done the work. And then it also provides the raw information and some and formatted outputs that you could also include in, say, a proposal at a technical volume or some kind of proposal document to the customer saying, here's what we're going to, here's our requirements traceability matrix to your requirements. So this is a good way of summarizing all the hard work done by the cross-functional team in the end.
Thanks, Jim. And one added wrinkle is with our responsibility matrix, we can actually now start to apply a column per category. And Paul, you can speak a little bit to the benefits around this.
Yeah, so based on the data dictionary example we looked at earlier, where we were carving up the categories by function. If you do a responsibility matrix based on those key terms in the dictionary that we said, oh, these are supply chain, or this is what program management cares about. When you do a responsibility matrix, now you're getting the highlight of those key terms and an X in the column next to the discipline, that now that kind of narrows it down to, hey, here's the things they could filter their column and say, here's what I need to pay attention to. And then what you'll notice is there's primary requirement or requirement consideration. So now if you get multiple hits, you may need to adjudicate with, say, contracts and engineering to say, okay, who really owns this, or what's we got a statement here that's hitting a couple key terms, and what does this really mean, and then who owns it, and then they can go off and evaluate. Yeah, are we compliant to this? Is this just standard operating procedure for us, or is there something unique that we need to address?
Perfect. And Paul, I believe you can actually have a adjacent example, which is using the same functionality, but just in a really unique and different, interesting way. And I have that one here for us.
Okay. So I'm involved in so my role today is really to help engineering across 3 sites become common processes, common tools, and corporate happens to be doing this operational excellence initiative where they want to flow down a product development lifecycle policy. To put it in perspective, Leonardo DRS is carved up into like 7 business units, say 3 to 5 companies in each business unit. And they were all really at one point individual companies, kind of accumulated or purchased along the way. And so Jim and I are in naval power systems. We're literally four companies or 4 sites merged together, and the initiative was initial scope was 3 of them. So the ask was to me, because one of the gentlemen who's on the corporate team knew I knew Visible. Hey, can you shred this policy for us and pull out all the requirements? And initially from the dictionary, I was really just pulling out requirements and optional, your shall, will, musts, and then just some should, would, coulds, or may, just to give kind of highlight these could be kind of considered weasel words, like, well, maybe I don't have to really comply to it, but and then corporate liked that because they were like, oh, maybe we should change some of those to shalls, or maybe we'll leave them flexible. And then the ask was, hey, we have all these other terms like is required, or reported, or all these other terms. Is it possible to add those? So I was like, oh yeah. So I added a category through all these terms and shredded this policy for them. And then I was like, well, let me use the macro, but use it in a unique way. So what the purpose was, or thinking was, is this policy is going to flow down to all these DRS companies, and they are going to have to evaluate their local processes, their engineering product development processes to this, to say, how do we comply? And so rather than, assessing requirements by function, I said, well, we're going to break it up by phase. Their document by, is it the planning phase, system requirements phase, system design? So where in the development life cycle are these requirements being introduced that I need to comply to? I basically ignored the verification method. And then if you scroll down, David, I repurposed the compliant terms to be compliant partially or not yet, because in corporate's view, there is no take an exception. They're going to flow it down, and you're going to say, I'm either compliant as is, I'm partially compliant, and then what's my actions to get fully compliant, or not yet compliant, I'm silent on this requirement, but I have an action now to address it in my my procedures. And so going through an evaluation, checking how do we line up to these, so we've got the phase now. So from the drop down, it used to say engineering, program management, supply chain. I repurposed all those terms, and then I repurposed the compliant with the clarification, compliant with exception, or exception, and to really just highlight on the top 3. And then on the summary, the nice thing is now I'm getting a pie chart, a visual that says, hey, based on my evaluation, our procedures as is are 85% compliant to what's flowing down to us. 9% were silent. We need to take some action. 6% is hey, we're partially compliant, and we just need to look at it to see what's it going to take to get compliant. And I kind of highlighted the cells in the assessment above, but out of the 176 unique, there's none left to assess. So in this example, we assessed them all, and then there are 26. So anything that was partially compliant or not yet requires an action plan, and so 24 of those are missing an action plan. And so on the policy tab, the actual shredded document, you would just see that we repurposed the column from what would have said requirements column, and we just called it action plan. And so it's just a unique way to be able to say, well, here's another way to utilize this macro in a different manner. And really, the sky's the limit. You could use these those columns and repurpose them, the drop down pick list, to whatever you think you can come up with for measuring your compliance to something, too.
Brilliant. Thanks a million for that insight, Paul. So that's the conclusion of our demo. I'm just going to jump back to my deck to give a brief resumption of it and maybe get some closing points from Paul and Jim. But so some of the business benefits to essentially being able to use VisibleThread, both for your shredding and alongside with the macro, is we're saving time. So that manual workload per opportunity, we're breaking that down from days to hours and shredding. The process review and then disseminating the amendments, that can now be done in minutes, and all you need to do is adjust that instructions tab. Better use of resources. You don't have multiple proposal managers, team leads, or even a single colleague duplicating the review in potential different shapes and forms. This helps to give you a little bit of a framework that you know what you're going to be getting back. You're avoiding non-compliance by automating that kind of calculation and ensuring there's no missed clarifications, no missed exceptions. The feedback loop is automated in a sense because the non-technical teams now have a framework for how they give their feedback. You're then controlling the non-technical requirements. And Paul or Jim, this is something you actually brought up quite interestingly, that the non-technical requirements sometimes have a bit of a gap to them.
Yeah, and I could briefly speak to that. So, we've been focused really on, okay, this is the bid and proposal phase, right? And shredding those documents coming in from our customer and ensuring that when we put a bid together, we've accounted for all the requirements. So now we win the bid and we're awarded the contract. Well, engineering's frankly not going to work out of these spreadsheets. We're working out of primarily IBM Rational Doors, looking at other requirements tools, but they're going to be working out of a requirements management tool or database that's integrated to other development tools, because we need to prove and show traceability from those requirements to design, documentation or source code or whatever it is. But where the gap was, and again going back to part of our problem was the non-technical requirements, the functions that are not as well disciplined or versed in scrubbing and accounting for requirements. And so at contract award, you would shred, or if there were no changes, you could take what came out of the proposal, and you could use that compliance matrix, pretty much hide all the ones that were from engineering, filter all those out, and then use that for the contract to say, okay, supply chain, is there any actions you had from this bid to become compliant to these flow down requirements, or quality, or manufacturing, and what the other areas that may need to pay attention to some of these requirements. And so this is a perfect vehicle for the program manager and the team to now manage those what we consider non-technical. The technical are really all the requirements that are going to end up indoors and steer the design of the product we're eventually going to deliver.
Perfect. And Jim, I don't know if you'd like to give a little bit of closing comment.
Yeah, just in general, the incorporation of just VisibleThread generally, and this macro specifically, really is a big time saver. and it really just makes sure that we're capturing everything we need early on. You know, when you're proposing, especially some of the projects we work on are very large, like I said, both from a schedule and from a cost perspective. So ensuring that you know, one small miss could mean very significant financial or schedule implications. So having a more organized tool set to be able to coordinate teams early on is very valuable to tee up a proposal to be a very successfully executed project.
Brilliant, perfect. Thanks so much. So that's it really from me. Again, I just want to reiterate how it's been an absolute pleasure working with Paul and Jim, and their industry insight, their knowledge has personally educated me, but helped educate VisibleThread in a massive way about how, you know, it's these unique use cases that really we're discovering as we go, but it's the simplicity of the product in that we can apply it in such a huge number of ways in such time-saving manner. It's just really taking some of that manual effort out. But again, it's these interactions I have every day with our customers that just really enthuse me about what the future can bring. But thanks, Claire. I'll hand it back over to you if we have any questions or questions.
Yeah, thanks, guys. That was great. Really insightful. I think you answered a lot of people's questions throughout the discussion, so that's great. And one question I have here is, does it take a lot of time to actually do the macro or to apply the macro?
Well, no. So actually it's shared in a Excel macro workbook, and anytime you check that checkbox for enable macros, it'll just be available on the drop-down menu, and it's one click, and all of the columns on the initial shred will be applied, and your instruction and your summary will appear alongside it.
Great.
Yeah, so do the other customers have that then? Is that readily available, or they need a new workbook to import?
Nope. So we're going to have a shareable workbook that if anyone after this, so it'll come alongside this slide deck, and there'll be a shareable workbook with the macro included.
Right. And you demonstrated how fast it is, right?
Yep.
So you just click on the button, you get the columns, and the other two tabs show up immediately. So.
Great. And then I guess this question is probably for Paul and Jim. How much time do you think you actually saved by implementing the macro?
Oh, I definitely, it's appreciable. I guess I could give an example. We were working on a fairly large proposal last summer prior to having this developed, and I could just say the amount of time we had multiple engineers and other folks outside the engineering group reviewing. I think it was one main technical spec with something like 20 appendices, having to assign those out and then ultimately tabulating up. I was spending a lot of time doing Excel wizardry, trying to, okay, do a count, sum if, count, and trying to figure out, did we capture them all, and going through, and it was days of effort. Whereas this process here, establishing that framework automatically in a matter of minutes allows the focus to be on going through the requirements and not trying to manage the files and all of the various outputs. So I would say it for a big proposal, it could be on the order of days of time saving, which when you have a short period of window to digest and bid on something can be a lifesaver.
And we certainly have examples, Jim, where we've been bit by missing requirements, and I know on the non-technical side, and that's actually what drove us to start using VisibleThread to shred, is because there were misses. Now I don't have a number off the top of my head on the cost, but we were bit by having requirements imposed on us that were missed during the bid. So now you got all that downstream cost to the program you were not anticipating or accounted for.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, that's great. And if anybody has any other questions, you can leave them in the survey at the very end of the webinar. So thank you very much. And we just want to skip on there. Yeah. So if anybody would like to learn more about VisibleThread, you can visit our website at visiblethread.com/VTDocs. And definitely feel free to contact us at support@visiblethread.com. And if any of you are not yet a VT customer, you can contact us at info@visiblethread.com. So I just want to thank Jim and Paul for joining us today, and David as well. And yeah, we'll see everybody soon.